It's top of the hour, and it's time for Making a Difference. This is a program that showcases people from our community who make a difference in our lives. I'm your host, CJ Metcalfe, and today we are going to look into the inner workings of the prison system, specifically the state prison system that is located down in Charlotte County. We have a guest with us today, Officer Lewis, who is going to talk about the inner workings of the prison system, things that go on there, how the inmates are treated, and what opportunities they have and don't have. So please welcome my guest, Officer Tom Lewis.
Thank you for having me, CJ.
Yes, thank you for being here. This is going to be kind of interesting. I know that you have a lot of experience in your past in law enforcement, which made you a perfect candidate to work well in the prison system. Just give a little brief summary to everybody about what your past has built up to today.
Okay, so I started my law enforcement career right there at Charlotte Correctional at the state prison system. I was a housing officer in what they call an open population dormitory. So there were about 225 inmates in the dormitory that I supervised, and you're responsible for everything with their daily lives, whether they are getting fed, whether they need clothing, whether they need medical care, whether they need recreation time, certain programs that they're involved in, education. You basically oversee their day-to-day life. So I did that for about 3.5 years. That was from 95 to about 98. Then I joined the Punta Gorda Police Department. Ultimately, from 1998 all the way through 2017, I was with the police department, and ultimately went back to Charlotte Correctional about 2 years ago, and I actually just recently left there about a month ago.
That's qualification to me. You should know what you're talking about.
I think so.
Okay, let's go to the prison. About what percentage of the inmates arrive with a substance abuse problem that is so prevalent in our county? Any idea?
Well, let me kind of explain a little bit of Charlotte Correctional. So there are maybe about 115 different institutions throughout the state, and they all cover different types of missions, if you will. Some prisons focus on the severely mentally ill. Some focus on violent or management problem inmates. Some focus on just general population inmates that are just basically serving their time for whatever crime they committed. There are certainly community corrections where folks that are not particularly incarcerated in a major institution may be out in your community, transitional type things. So at Charlotte Correctional, they are focused on what they call close management. Close management, for the layperson to explain it, is once you become a management problem throughout the prison system, regardless of where you're at. I apologize for the dogs. You ultimately get sent to a prison like Charlotte Correctional where they can manage you better. So if you're violent towards staff or you're violent towards another inmate, ultimately you would get sent to Charlotte Correctional where their mission is a close management facility. So when you talk about the percentage of inmates that are addicted to narcotics, it's kind of hard because their population transitions from day to day as far as inmates that get transferred out and inmates that get transferred in. The open population inmates that are there, you have to have a small percentage at every facility to run the place, cooking the food, washing the clothes, sanitation, those type of things. But it is very prevalent in the prison system. Drugs are everywhere. Conducting cell searches and searches of even common areas, things like that. Drugs are extremely common, and every type of drug you could imagine.
You know what I'm going to ask next is how do they get in there?
Several ways. First off, Charlotte Correctional has what they call a road crew. They contract with the Department of Transportation to clean roads. Unfortunately, they have staff that are manipulated by the inmates. They're ultimately offered money and other type of things to smuggle in cell phones, to smuggle in drugs, to smuggle in basically anything that you can get on the street. There are staff out there that get caught. To say a regular basis, I don't know would be an overstatement. I think the 2 years that I was out there, there were maybe 9 or 10 different staff members that are either developing romantic relationships and ultimately smuggling things into the inmates, or developing a business partnership, if you will. They're getting paid. The inmates will have a cell phone that is smuggled in. They'll download a cash app, and ultimately they're able to pay whatever staff member is willing to bring in drugs or other contraband. So as far as the DOT crew goes, they're able to actually coordinate with their family, friends, or gang member affiliates to drop whatever contraband items on the side of the road where they may or may not be working, and they ultimately are able to smuggle that back in once they return to the facility. So there's several ways. Recently,
is it on their person? I mean, I'm sure they're
yes,
searched when they come back in.
they are searched. There are some limitations. They are strip searched before they leave the facility and before they come back in. But there are levels of searches. Obviously, you can have a pat down search, you can have a strip search where they're unclothed, and you can have a body cavity search, which is only conducted by medical professionals. So there are limitations when you have mass number of inmates coming and going on a regular basis. The bottom line is you're going to miss things. In addition to that, they found a drone that was on top of the food service building at some point. And it was a fairly, the way it was described is it could carry a significant amount of weight for miles, based upon the model that it was. Ultimately, it broke down and they found it on top of one of the prison buildings inside the facility. But again, that's just another way that these inmates are now, through technology, are able to smuggle in whatever they want.
Tell me about the cell block accommodations. Like, what is in a typical cell block in the state prison system, as far as like a sink, bed, TV, toilet,
Okay.
whatever.
Sure. So there's different types of dormitories. The most common at Charlotte Correctional is what they call a butterfly dormitory, where the building itself is separated into 4 sections. They are 2 tiers, all the way across. So you have about 28 cells in each one of these 4 sections to ultimately house about 250 inmates, give or take, as long as they're 2-man cells. So you have 2 beds, or 1 if it's a 1-person cell. They have some ADA requirements if an inmate has a wheelchair or some other disability. But typically speaking, the most common is you'll have 2 persons per cell in an open population dormitory, 1 toilet, 1 sink, and then they have these lockers that inmates can keep some of their personal belongings, photographs of family, canteen items, and those sorts of things. Now, at Charlotte Correctional, we talked about before, they're not an open population prison. They're what they call a close management prison. So a majority of their dormitories are confinement. So these inmates are basically kept in their cells 23 hours a day because of their past violent behavior or disciplinary issues that they had at another facility, and they were ultimately transferred here for essentially punishment. They're classified into a different group, I guess, if you will.
So what you're saying is, depending upon their behavior and their past, depends upon if they have a private cell, a bunkmate, how long they get to spend in their cell, or how long they have to spend in their cell, right?
That is correct, and it also has to do with they classify inmates as far as gang affiliation. You certainly wouldn't want to put opposing gang members in a cell together. So, at some point, it becomes very difficult to house everybody safely, I guess, if you will, because there's just so much going on, and the staff only have so much intel.
How many inmates can the Charlotte Correctional Prison, how many inmates can it house at one time?
Okay, so they have, like we talked about, 28 cells per quad, if you will, right? Times 4 for every dormitory. And they have a total of 7 housing dormitories, excluding disciplinary confinement. So in an open population setting, which again, they're not, they could house right around 1,250. but that number gets greatly reduced for inmates that can't have a cellmate. There are inmates at Charlotte Correctional who have killed their cellmate in the past and claim they will kill their cellmate again if you put a cellmate in the room with them. And so ultimately, those threats are taken seriously, and then that becomes a one-man cell. So again, that the number fluctuates, dependent upon who they have at the facility. And inmates, again, based on gang affiliation, are sometimes transferred to other facilities just so they don't get a stronghold in any one particular location. They like to shuffle them around the state, just keeping that fluid.
What are some of the luxuries that, they are allowed at the different levels? Like the minimum, what is the luxury they have? And then when they're maximum by themselves, what luxuries do they have? I mean, I hear that people say that there's televisions in each cell, that they aren't really being punished for the crime. Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of talked about the fact that there are different types of prisons, right? Some that house the mentally ill, some that house disabled inmates in more of a hospital setting. There's also what they call an incentivized prison. So if you are an inmate that has not had disciplinary issues, you're convicted of certain crimes that qualify, you can get sent to an incentive prison such as Everglades Correctional, where you can play video games, on Xbox and things like that, and have I mean, the term luxury is very subjective, but have more luxurious accommodations than, say, an inmate who is at Charlotte Correctional, who has none of those luxuries, where you're, again, confined to yourself for 23 hours a day, and your only recreation time is inside of a very, very small chain link fenced area where you get to walk back and forth and do some, body mechanic exercises like push-ups and sit-ups. So at Charlotte Correctional, they really don't have many luxuries at all. The open population inmates that, I hate to say run the prison, but run the day-to-day, labor type stuff, like mow the lawn and cook the food and do the laundry, those type of inmates. They have a canteen, so they can get money sent to them from their family or friends. It gets put onto a cashless account where they use their ID card to buy cookies and sodas and kind of those type of luxury food items. They all have tablets as well. So the inmate prison system now has small 10-inch or 7-inch computer tablets where they can email their family back and forth. They can also download movies or songs for a fee. Everything's at a premium, of course. But those are some of the luxuries. Other than that, they really don't get any luxuries at all, at least not at Charlotte Correctional. As far as the TVs go, they don't have TVs in all of their individual cells. They typically have 4 TVs in every housing unit. So of the 28 cells, and you possibly have 2 men per cell, they get 1 TV. And they basically have to manage their own agreements, if you will, on what they're going to watch.
Yeah, I bet that starts some arguments.
Yes, it does, especially, when you get around Super Bowl and everything else, because of course, although it's against the rules, they're all gambling and those sorts of things.
Well, let's keep our focus on the Charlotte County facility.
Okay.
What is the biggest complaint that the inmates have?
Well, I talked to a lot of inmates over there when I was there. Their biggest complaint is the staff. I think when you're stripped of life's luxuries, I guess it's easy to focus on, how you're being treated. And I think that's the biggest thing there.
Wow. The laundry, like, what do they do? Do they put the laundry, their dirty clothes in a bag and somebody comes along and picks it up and it gets done elsewhere, or do they have to do their own laundry?
So, yeah, they all do their own laundry. Every inmate that's not assigned to a confined cell, all right, so all of your open population inmates, everybody has a job. So whether you work mowing the lawn or whether you work, Monday through Friday cleaning, or whether you work, they also have a pretty robust staff in their laundry division. So they do it right there on site. And in their laundry, they have inmates that are seamstresses that, do clothing repairs, make new clothing. They make almost all their own clothes. So all of the shirts, jackets, pants, boxer shorts, All of those things are made right on site by big rolls of fabric. And they teach the inmate basically a skill set that they hopefully can use on the outside to be maybe more successful and not reoffend. But yeah, essentially, if you want your laundry day once a week, you put it into a laundry bag. The bag goes right into a commercial size washer, ultimately gets taken out, thrown in the dryer, and returned to you the next day. So, and it's just kind of cycled in and out like that.
What about shaving and haircuts? I mean, are you going to allow them to have razors, or does a barber do that for them?
So they have both. In contrast to the 90s, where we used to issue disposable razors, nowadays they have gone away from that because you're essentially giving the inmate a potential weapon. The leniency is a little bit more so on the side of them being not fresh shaven. So they do get to have a little bit of facial hair as long as it conforms with the grooming standard. And they have barber shops that are free to the inmate, and they will do everything from cut your hair to shave your beard, and do all of those things. And then, of course, the inmates are permitted to have their own disposable battery operated razor. So nothing with razor blades they can't have, but you can purchase through the canteen your own personal razor. The only issue with that is they take the motor, and that's how they build some of the tattoo guns that they have in the prison system. So
I had heard that.
yeah,
And there are medical accommodations on site if
correct.
someone gets sick or they break a finger or something.
So they do have a medical department. They have a dental office that takes care of all their dental needs. They have a very, very small ER where they're able to stabilize the inmate. If in fact it's a little above their medical expertise, they do call an ambulance, and an ambulance comes onto the compound and takes the inmate to a private hospital locally here. And especially for surgery and things like that, obviously they don't do that on site, so they're shipped out. But they have a great medical team there, 24/7 type of operation. It doesn't matter if you have a cold or if you catch something a little bit more serious. They have all the prescription medications that you could possibly need. As you can imagine, we have inmates of all ages that have all kinds of medical conditions. And even go ahead.
Well, it's you're set up basically like a little miniature city within the complex.
Absolutely. Even the mental health services there, they have some prisons are set up as an inpatient mental health facility, and but at Charlotte and all of the other institutions, they have outpatient mental health services, counseling, therapy, prescription medication, that sort of thing. So
I was,
if you'd like to be on.
I'm sorry. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and it's a safety and security concern to bring people from the outside into the facility and potentially expose them to violent inmates. So they like to keep everything in house and like to have the ability to take care of whatever it is they need right there.
Well, I know you have there at Charlotte. I know there are some inmates there that are serving life sentences. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. There are plenty of inmates there that are serving life sentences. Yes, the facility is made for the management problems. So if you are an inmate and you're at any institution in the state of Florida and you are deemed to be a management problem, they send you to Charlotte because that's their mission is to deal with the more violent offenders.
As far as attempting rehabilitation programs or getting them to be functional human beings, I know that they have several programs set up there that they encourage the inmates to partake in, as far as academic programs, betterment programs, prevention programs, substance abuse. So are they required to participate in some of these programs?
The answer is yes. For a short time, when I first went back about 2 years ago, I actually taught some GED courses to the inmates, and they were required if they were within 6 months of being released, or if they were under 21 and did not have a high school diploma, they were required to attend GED courses. And they're also required, again, depending upon their classification, their age, their crime, things like that, they're also required to attend other programs. I also taught a reentry program where I teach them how to prepare for a job interview, what to wear, what to expect, how to be realistic in what you're applying for to make sure you don't need a certain license, or just giving them some basic skills, how to balance a checkbook. So they do have some of those basics, but again, they have a lot of other vocational related programs there as well. They have a masonry program. They have their own wastewater treatment plant where they'll teach inmates on how to do those type of skills, water treatment facilities. They have even their landscaping programs and cleaning programs. They try to take everything that they do and turn it into some sort of vocational education for the inmate that he may be able to use that to gain employment as opposed to going back and committing more robberies and the like.
Well, this facility here in Charlotte County is a fairly new facility by the national standards. I believe it was built in 1989?
Yes, 1989 it opened.
And aren't they expanding it at the present time?
So they also have, when you say expanding, the unfortunate thing in today's society is that more and more people are getting arrested and getting convicted, and so they're looking at prison reform. But there is a work camp that is attached to Charlotte Correctional in Fort Myers, where again we talked about like that transitional type of inmate where they go out into the community, they do work all day long, and then they come back. So it all kind of depends. Here at Charlotte, the actual main unit that we're talking about, that's not really changed at all. They're pretty much locked down with what they have. But 30 years of, or 30, what are we at, 32 years that they've been open, doesn't sound like it's a very aged prison. But I can assure you, it's well used. I can definitely say that. Some of the infrastructure again starts to deteriorate over 30 years.
How are they handling the COVID problem? Is there an issue there?
So we kind of touched on the laundry aspect. They actually self-manufactured all face masks, 2 per inmate, and they actually produced there at the laundry because of, again, the different type of facility. They produced them for the entire state of Florida. So these inmates basically learned how to hand manufacture through rolls of fabric face masks. And there is social distancing. They increase the amount of cleaner that they're distributing around to the inmates, and cleaning schedules and things like that. So I think they're doing the best they can with what they have. But unfortunately, the prison system is grossly underfunded. So it's just always kind of trying to do more with less, if you will.
That is it's funded with taxpayer money, state funds, right?
It is, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And one last question I'd like to get in before we leave. What is the average cost of housing a prisoner per year?
I don't have that number in front of me, but again, it depends, because at Charlotte Correctional, it's going to cost more because those folks are confined in a cell. So instead of going down to the chow hall and eating breakfast or eating lunch or eating dinner, those folks have to have meals prepared, and they're actually carted to their cell, and so there are differences there. But I mean, so per inmate, you'd have to break it down into where the inmate's classified at.
At one point, I heard it was to the tune of about $58,000 a year per prisoner. So
that definitely would not be a shocking number to me, for sure.
Tom Lewis, Officer Lewis, I would love to thank you for being on our show today. You brought a lot of insight. I hope that the listeners, pick something up. You are a person that has made a difference in our community, and you continue to do so. I thank you, sir, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.